I didn't snap when I found out she was cheating. That's the part people expect. They picture a man turning into a storm the moment he learns his wife has been lying, the moment a name becomes a bruise, the moment his bed becomes a crime scene. No, I stayed quiet. I stayed helpful. I stayed so calm I surprised myself. What cracked me open wasn't the affair itself. It was the laugh. Not a nervous laugh. Not a guilty laugh. Not the laugh someone makes when they're caught holding a knife behind their back. This was a clean, bright laugh, like a glass clinking against another glass, shared with 3 women who sat around my wife like she was a queen being entertained by her court. And I was the joke. Harborlight Pier looks harmless in daylight. A strip of board stretching into the ocean like a promise. Neon signs, cotton candy machines, a carousel that plays the same chipped melody every hour like it's stuck in 1998. But in late fall, after the tourists leave and the wind starts acting like it's got teeth, the pier turns into something else. The salt makes everything rust. The wood creaks like it's remembering every footstep it ever held. The arcade lights flicker even when the electricians swear nothing's wrong. That's where I work. Not as a manager, not as an executive, not as one of the bright smiles on the website. I'm the guy who makes sure nobody gets hurt. Maintenance and safety supervisor. The title looks respectable on paper. In real life, it means I'm the one who gets called when a ride stalls halfway up, when a gate won't latch, when some kid throws up in the funhouse and somebody decides that's an emergency. I know the pier the way you know your own house when you've lived in it long enough to hear its moods, which boards complain when you step on them, which locks stick in damp weather, which camera angles go blind when the fog rolls in. I also know people. That part was never in my job description, but it comes with the territory. You watch enough smiling families and drunk couples and teenagers trying to impress each other, you start recognizing patterns. The way a man looks when he thinks he's being watched. The way a woman looks when she knows she isn't. Maris didn't come from the pier. She came to it like a camera crew comes to a disaster. Interested, excited, ready to reframe it into something prettier, marketing and PR lead, the face, the voice, the person who could sell a broken bench as rustic coastal charm. She could take a photo of peeling paint and make it look like nostalgia. When she and I first met, she called Harborlight Pier sad, with a kind of tenderness that made me believe she meant it kindly. It just needs a story, she'd said. Now she was the story, and I was the guy hauling the cables behind the curtain. If you'd asked anyone on the pier, they would have told you the same thing about me. Good guy, quiet guy, reliable guy, the human version of a spare tire, useful when the road goes wrong, otherwise ignored. I used to think I didn't mind. There's a certain comfort in being underestimated. People don't watch you closely. They don't lock their mouths around you. They don't polish their lies when they think you're too dull to notice. I wasn't dull, I was just trained. You don't keep rides safe by being emotional. You keep them safe by being consistent, by doing the checklist even when your hands are cold and your brain is tired, by not letting panic make decisions. That habit followed me home. I did the dishes when Maris left her wine glass on the counter like a little flag marking her territory. I put the laundry in the dryer when she forgot. I kept the bills paid. I kept the house quiet. I kept her comfortable. And she rewarded me the way you reward a dog that sits on command. A warm touch. A kiss. A soft voice. A night where she pretended we were still a team. Then, when she wanted something, when she wanted me to agree, to apologize, to drop a subject, to stop asking questions, she'd go cold. It wasn't dramatic. That would have been too obvious. It was clinical, like a switch. If I pushed back, she'd smile with that patient little expression people use on children, and she'd say things like, "Don't be difficult, Gideon." I can't tell you how many times she said my name like it was a warning. I didn't understand it for a long time, not fully. I thought it was just marriage, compromise, rhythm, give and take. But you can live inside something for years and still not see the shape of it until someone laughs and draws the outline for you. That night, the pier hosted one of those partners' dinners, off-season networking dressed up as community support. The kind of event where donors sip expensive liquor in a heated restaurant while I stand outside making sure the emergency exits aren't blocked by floral arrangements. Maris loved those dinners. She loved people watching her. She loved being watched. She'd spent over an hour choosing a dress that looked effortless. She'd made me wear a jacket I hated because she said it made us look solid. "Like we belong here," she'd said, smoothing my lapel with both hands, eyes bright. "Just smile. Don't be weird." I smiled. I wasn't weird. I wasn't anything. The restaurant sat right at the base of the pier, all glass walls and candlelight, the kind of place that tries to convince you it isn't next door to an arcade full of sticky floors and broken claw machines. Maris's friends were already there when we arrived. Tessa Brandt sat closest to her, like a guard dog in heels. Dark hair, sharp eyes, a laugh that always carried just a little too far, like she wanted strangers to hear it and wonder what they'd missed. Alawan Price was the quiet one. She had the kind of face that never seemed surprised, as if she'd already planned for every outcome and was merely watching you step into it. And Juno was loud, pretty, and careless in a way that made her dangerous. The kind of woman who spilled secrets the way she spilled drinks. They greeted Maris like I wasn't there. Air kisses, squeals, compliments that were really ranking systems. Then Tessa looked at me and smiled like she was being charitable. "Oh my God," she said. "Gideon, you're here. Cute." Cute. I was a grown man with calloused hands and a job that involved shutting down rides before they hurt people. I'd been called a lot of things. Cute was not one of them. Maris squeezed my arm like I was a prop she needed to reposition. "Go grab us a bottle," she said, voice sweet. "You know what I like." Of course I did. I went to the bar and bought the bottle like a good husband, like a good prop, like a good spare tire. When I came back, they were laughing about something on Tessa's phone. Some video, some man doing something stupid in public. Their laughter had that hungry edge, the pleasure of watching someone else be humiliated. Maris looked over her shoulder at me and smiled. Not warm, not kind, just polished. I set the bottle down. I poured their glasses. And then, because there are only so many times a man can stand in a circle of perfume and condescension before he needs oxygen, I excused myself to use the restroom. The restaurant's hallway curved toward the back, past the kitchen doors where heat and voices spilled out, the sound of plates clinking, the sizzle of something dying in a pan. I was halfway there when I realized I'd forgotten my phone at the table. I turned back, and I slowed down before I reached the doorway. Not because I was trying to listen, because I heard my name. Tessa's voice, loud enough to carry, bright with that same clean amusement she used when she watched strangers fail. "I swear," she said, "it's the easiest thing in the world." Juno giggled. "Stop. You're mean." "I'm not mean," Tessa said. "I'm impressed." Then Maris, my wife, laughed. Not a chuckle, not a snort, not a guilty laugh, a full, delighted laugh. And she said, clear as a bell in a church, "Honestly, I control him with just one simple thing." Silence followed for half a second, the kind of silence people pause in when they're waiting for the punchline. Then the women erupted. Elowen made a soft sound, almost admiring. Juno slapped the table. Tessa laughed so hard she had to wipe at her eye. My heart didn't race. It went cold. Because in that moment, the room rearranged itself in my mind. Every "don't be difficult." Every switch from warm to ice. Every time I apologized first just to get the peace back. Every time I did the dishes and told myself I was being mature. I stood there in the hallway, unseen, holding my breath like I'd walked into a room with a gas leak. Juno's voice floated out, teasing. "Does it still work every time?" Maris answered like she was discussing a product she'd tested. "Every time," she said. "He'll act tough for like a day, then he gets needy. Then he's back to being good." Tessa snorted. "Men are so predictable." Alawan, quiet and precise. "It's not men, it's him. He's attached to you." Attached. Like a lamp cord. Like something useful because it stayed plugged in. My first instinct was to walk in there, set the bottle down, and say something that would make them choke on their laughter. But another instinct, older, colder, better trained, put a hand on my chest and held me back. The instinct that keeps people alive on rides. Don't react. Observe. Collect. I turned and walked the rest of the way to the restroom like I hadn't heard a thing. I looked at myself in the mirror above the sink. A man in a jacket he didn't like. A face that made people comfortable because it didn't demand attention. Eyes that had watched enough broken bolts and frayed cables to recognize a failure before it happened. I smiled at my reflection. It looked wrong, like a mask someone had put on me years ago and I'd forgotten how to remove. I went back to the table and sat down. They were still laughing, softer now, like the joke had been fully enjoyed and put away. Maris leaned over and kissed my cheek. "Where'd you go?" she asked, sweet as syrup. I looked at her, really looked. The perfect eyeliner, the confident posture, the small tilt of her mouth that always suggested she knew something you didn't, and in that moment, I understood something that should have been obvious. The affair wasn't the problem, not the main one. The problem was that she didn't see me as a person. She saw me as a mechanism, a lever she could pull, a switch she could flip, a thing, and she'd been so sure of her control that she'd laughed about it out loud, in public, like the world was her living room. I lifted my glass and took a sip of water. Maris watched me the way someone watches a dog for tricks. I gave her nothing. No glare, no argument, no hurt, just calm. Her smile faltered for the briefest moment, as if she'd pressed a button and the expected response hadn't happened. Then she recovered and turned back to her friends. The conversation drifted to peer politics. Donors, renovation talk, the developer, Callum Greer, and his vision for Harborlight. Maris spoke his name like it tasted good in her mouth. I listened. I nodded in the right places. I made one dry joke about the pier needing less vision and more bolts, and they laughed politely, the way you laugh at a child repeating something clever he didn't invent. All the while, something inside me was moving, slow and steady. Not anger, not heartbreak, a decision. Because the one simple thing she thought she controlled me with, she'd been right. It had controlled me for years. But control only works when the other person wants what you're withholding. And sitting there under the restaurant's warm lights, with the ocean wind rattling the windows, I realized I didn't want it anymore. Not from her. Not at her price. Not if it made me a puppet that could be mocked between sips of wine. I finished my water. I set the glass down. Maris reached under the table and brushed her fingers against my leg. Casual, possessive, a little signal meant to remind me who she thought I belonged to. I didn't move. Her fingers paused, like she'd touched something unfamiliar. I looked at her and smiled, small and polite. The kind of smile you give a stranger when you're done being friendly. That night, when we got home, she expected the usual. She expected me to follow her upstairs. She expected the leash to tighten and me to come running. Instead, I took off my jacket, hung it carefully in the closet, and walked down the hall to the spare room. I heard her behind me, heard the soft confusion in her steps. "What are you doing?" she asked. I opened the spare room door. "Sleeping," I said. She laughed once, like it was a joke, like I was being dramatic. Then the laugh faded when she realized I wasn't turning around. "Gideon," she said, sharper now, "don't be difficult." There it was, the switch, the control line. I stepped into the spare room and closed the door gently, like I was shutting a file cabinet. And on the other side, in the quiet, I heard her stand there for a long moment, waiting, expecting the one simple thing to work. It didn't, not anymore. And that was when I started planning what would happen next. The first move wasn't revenge, it was silence. Not the sulking kind, not the kind that begs to be noticed. I mean the kind of silence that changes the air in a house. The kind that makes a person look up from their phone because the background noise they've been using you for suddenly stops. I slept in the spare room like I meant it. No dramatic slammed doors, no bitter speeches. I brushed my teeth, set my alarm, and turned off the light. In the dark, I listened. Not for footsteps, not for sobbing, not for an apology. For patterns. Because that's what I do. I find the weak point before it fails catastrophically. I tighten what's loose. I replace what's worn. I stop pretending something is safe just because it hasn't hurt anyone yet. Around midnight, Maris opened the spare room door. She didn't knock. She never did. The door belonged to her in the same way she believed I did. A slice of hallway light cut across the bed and landed on my face. She stood there in her silk robe like a movie villain who still thinks she's the hero. "You're seriously doing this?" she asked. Her voice was soft, but it had teeth under it. I kept my eyes half-lidded like I was barely awake. It wasn't an act. I'd worked 10 hours and my body felt like wet concrete. "Yes," I said. One word. No explanation. Explanations were the rope she used to pull me back into the old dance. She waited. I could feel her trying to decide which version of herself to use. Warm Maris, cold Maris, mocking Maris, victim Maris. It was like watching someone scroll through outfits in a closet. Finally, she walked in and sat on the edge of the bed. Her perfume hit me like a memory I no longer wanted. "You're being weird," she said, trying for casual. "Did someone say something to you tonight?" There it was, the first probe, the attempt to locate the crack. I stared at the ceiling. "I'm tired." Maris gave a small laugh. Tight, dismissive. "Oh my God, Gideon. Don't do that thing where you pretend you're fine." I almost smiled. That was rich, coming from a woman who had built a career out of pretending everything was fine. "I am fine," I said. She waited again, still expecting the leash to work. If she pressed the right button, I'd start talking. If I started talking, I'd start reacting. If I started reacting, she'd steer. But I didn't react. Her hand slid onto my chest, just above my shirt. A slow, practiced touch, not affection, a tool being applied. "If you're upset," she murmured, "you can just come to bed. We can reset." Reset. Like you hit a button and erase the last 10 years. I looked at her hand the way you look at something you used to crave and now just recognize as a trick. "No," I said. That word landed heavier than it should have. Not because it was loud, because it was final. She froze. Then she pulled her hand back like the bed had burned her. Her voice sharpened. Okay, wow. So we're punishing each other now? I turned my head and looked at her. I'm not punishing you. Then what are you doing? The old version of me would have answered. The old version would have tried to make her understand. The old version would have explained his feelings like that was a safe thing to offer. I gave her the truth instead. I'm sleeping. Maris stared at me like I'd spoken another language. Her eyes flicked over my face, searching for the crack again. Then she stood up, robe swishing, and her expression shifted into that patient little smile. Fine, she said. Sleep. But don't act like this doesn't have consequences. There it was, the threat wrapped in civility. She left the room and closed the door hard enough to make the frame rattle. I didn't move. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clear. The next morning, I went to work like nothing was wrong, because nothing at work was wrong. Work made sense. Work had rules. Work didn't pretend it was love. Harborlight in the morning is an animal waking up slow. Seagulls arguing over trash. A few locals walking the boardwalk because they can't stand being inside. Salt air that makes your lungs feel clean and your hands feel dry. I unlocked the maintenance office, hung my jacket, and did what I always did. Checked the incident log. We'd had a gate alarm the night before. False trigger. Wind. That happens. Still, I wrote it down again in my own notebook. Not because I thought the wind was suspicious. Because I'd learned the hard way that the first move in any war is making the other person look unstable. If you don't document reality, someone else will rewrite it. Rafi was already in the security room when I stopped by. He sat in front of the monitors with a paper cup of coffee that smelled like burnt regret. He looked up. You look like you got hit by a truck. Truck missed me, I said. Just clipped my ego. Rafi snorted. He'd known me long enough to recognize when my jokes were covering something heavy, but he also knew better than to push. How's the storm prep? He asked. Fine. We need to replace the latch on gate 3. It's sticking. Again? Everything's sticking. Even the ocean wants to quit. He laughed, then pointed at one monitor. Maris was here early, came in with Callum. My face stayed still. My stomach didn't. I kept my voice bored on purpose. Marketing meeting? Rafi shrugged. Looked like it. On the screen, the pier entrance showed two figures crossing the boards. A woman in a light coat, Maris, walking just slightly ahead, hair perfect, posture confident. Beside her, a taller man in a dark jacket, moving like he belonged there. Callum Greer. I'd met him twice. Once at a town meeting where he talked about revitalizing Harborlight, like it was a sick pet he'd agreed to adopt. Once at a donor lunch where he shook my hand and looked at my nails, like he was checking whether I belonged at the table. He always smiled like a man who had never been told no in his life. On the monitor, he leaned toward Maris as they walked. She tilted her head up to listen. Not the way you lean toward someone in a loud place. The place wasn't loud. The place was empty. My brain did what brains do when they're finally allowed to accept what they've been avoiding. It added up. The partner's dinner. Her friends, the laugh, the timing. Callum always around the pier, always working with Maris, always pushing his plans. It wasn't just cheating, it was strategy. Maris didn't pick men at random. She picked leverage. I watched them reach the midpoint of the pier near the shuttered arcade. Callum's hand went to the small of her back. Casual, proprietary. She didn't flinch, she didn't move away. She just kept walking like nothing in the world was wrong. I stared at the monitor until Rafi's voice pulled me back. You want me to rewind? He asked, halfway joking. No, I said. It's fine. Rafi studied me for a second, then looked away. If you say so. I left the security room and walked out onto the boardwalk. The air was sharp. The ocean looked like steel. In the distance, the Ferris wheel stood still, its metal arms reaching out like a skeleton. I told myself something simple. Don't rush. Rushing is how people fall. Rushing is how they make mistakes. Rushing is how they end up as the story someone else tells about them. I went through my morning tasks. I checked the bolts on the funhouse emergency exit. I tested the alarm sensors. I signed off on the safety report for the carousel even though nobody would ride it until spring. It was boring, and the boredom helped. At lunch, I sat alone in my truck and ate a sandwich that tasted like cardboard and discipline. I didn't text Maris, I didn't ask where she was, I didn't do the things she expected, cling, question, accuse, because that was the one simple thing she loved, my emotional hunger. The way she could starve me and then feed me and watch me become grateful. I'd stopped being hungry. That afternoon, Maris finally texted me. Just one sentence. "Where are you?" I stared at it. Then I typed, "Work." Nothing else, no emoji, no explanation. 5 minutes later, another text. "We need to talk tonight. Don't be childish." Childish. That one always made me laugh internally. It's amazing how often people call you childish when you stop letting them use you. I put my phone face down and finished my shift. When I got home, the house smelled like a candle Maris liked. Something expensive, trying too hard to smell like cozy. She was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter like she'd been waiting there for a camera to arrive. Her smile was ready. "Hey," she said, too bright. "I made dinner." That was new. Maris didn't make dinner. Maris ordered dinner and called it supporting local business. I glanced at the stove. There was pasta in a pot, steam rising, a salad, bread. It looked normal. I almost admired the effort. Then I remembered the laugh. I took a plate and sat down. "Thanks." And Maris watched me eat like she was trying to decide if she'd poisoned me. Not literally, obviously. I'm not that interesting, but emotionally? She wanted to see if dinner would buy her control back. "About last night," she began, sliding into the chair across from me. "That whole spare room thing. I don't like it." I twirled pasta around my fork. "Okay." She blinked. "Okay?" "Yes." Maris frowned, then smoothed her expression again. "Gideon, come on. This is ridiculous. We're married." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you mad at me?" I looked up and met her gaze. No. It was true, in a way. Mad implied heat. Heat implied care. I wasn't hot. I was cold and steady. Maris leaned forward, lowering her voice as if intimacy could be poured like wine. "If something is bothering you, I want you to tell me." I almost laughed. She wanted me to tell her so she could argue it into the ground, twist it, reframe it, and end up the victim. She wanted a debate, a performance. I didn't give her one. "I'm fine," I said again. Her jaw tightened. The mask slipped for half a second. Then she stood up and walked around the table. Her hand landed on my shoulder, fingers pressing just a little too hard. "Look at me," she said. I kept eating. Her grip tightened. "Gideon." I set my fork down slowly and looked up at her. Maris smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "This isn't you." I tilted my head. "Maybe you didn't know me." That one hit. Her face flickered. Annoyance, then fear, then anger. She let go of my shoulder like she'd touched something sharp. "You're being dramatic." I stood up and carried my plate to the sink. "I'm going to bed." "Your bed," she snapped. I paused at the hallway entrance and looked back. Maris's eyes were bright with anger now, and underneath it, something else. Uncertainty. She hated uncertainty. She needed to know which version of me she was dealing with so she could pick the right tools. I gave her a small, polite smile. "Good night," I said. In the spare room, I lay in the dark again and listened. At first, nothing. Then, soft footsteps, the creak of the master bedroom door, a pause, the faint sound of her phone, a message notification, 2 quick chimes. Then her voice, low and warm, speaking into the phone like she didn't want to be overheard. I couldn't make out the words, but I heard the tone, the one she used when she wanted someone, the one she used when she was sure she still had control. I stared at the ceiling, and for the first time since the restaurant, my pulse kicked up. Not from jealousy, from timing. Because if she was messaging him now, right after failing to steer me, then this wasn't just an affair. It was a contingency plan. A place she went when her one simple thing stopped working. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A new text, unknown number, no greeting, just a screenshot. A lock screen preview from Maris's phone, captured at just the right moment. "Callum, tomorrow night, same place. Don't bring him." My throat went dry. Under the screenshot, one more line appeared. "You think she controls you with one thing? That's not the thing you should be afraid of." I didn't reply to the message. That was the first lesson I forced myself to follow. Never answer while the emotions are still hot. Replies are fingerprints. Silence is a locked door. I set the phone face down and stared at the ceiling until the numbers on my alarm clock blurred together. Somewhere on the other side of the wall, Maris laughed softly at something on her screen. Not the bright laugh she used with her friends, not the polished laugh she used in public. This one was intimate, private, chosen. I rolled onto my side and let it settle in my bones. Tomorrow night. Same place. There was always a same place with her. She liked routines when they served her. She liked familiar rooms where she already knew where the exits were. I slept. Not well, but enough. Morning came gray and wet, the kind of coastal drizzle that doesn't fall so much as hover. The pier looked half drowned, boards darkened by moisture, the ocean breathing slow and heavy beneath it. I went through my routine like muscle memory: coffee, boots, keys, jacket. Maris was already gone. No note, no text, no performative goodbye kiss, just absence. I drove to work with the radio off. When your mind starts cataloging instead of spiraling, silence helps. At Harborlight, the pier was quiet in that way that feels temporary, like something's holding its breath. Off-season means fewer people, fewer witnesses, fewer mistakes you can blame on crowds. I unlocked the maintenance office and checked the schedule. Tonight, there was a private investor walkthrough planned after closing hours. Officially, it was to discuss infrastructure improvements and safety compliance. Unofficially, it was Callum Greer measuring the pier like a carcass. I stared at his name on the visitor log longer than necessary. Same place. The pier. Of course it was. I didn't do anything dramatic. I didn't reroute cameras or sabotage locks or start laying traps. Like this was a movie, I did what I always did. I made sure everything worked. I inspected the gates, tested the alarms, checked the emergency lighting along the catwalk near the old funhouse, signed my name on the safety board where anyone could see it. If something happened tonight, I wanted a paper trail that said I'd done my job. At noon, Raffi leaned in the doorway of the office, coffee in hand. "You hear about tonight?" he asked. I kept my eyes on the clipboard. "Investor tour?" "Yeah, Greer's bringing a couple of suits. Wants to see the pier after hours." Raffi made air quotes with 2 fingers. "Because apparently daylight lies." I nodded. "I'll stay late." Raffi raised an eyebrow. "You sure? You've already got a full shift." "I'm sure." He studied my face for a second, then shrugged. "Your call." He hesitated, then added, "Maris is around a lot today." I looked up. "Is she?" She was in the security room earlier, asked about camera coverage on the West End. That was interesting. I kept my voice neutral. "What did you tell her?" Raffi took a sip of coffee. "The truth, that we don't disable cameras unless there's maintenance." "Good." She didn't love that. People rarely love reality. Raffi smirked. "You okay, man?" I met his eyes. For a moment, I considered lying. That's what I'd always done. Smoothed things over, kept the peace. "I will be," I said. That was the most honest answer I could give. The afternoon dragged. The drizzle turned into a thin mist that made the lights along the boardwalk glow like they were underwater. The arcade flickered to life for a handful of locals passing time. A couple walked hand in hand near the carousel, pretending the cold didn't bother them. I fixed a loose railing near the funhouse entrance and caught my reflection in the warped glass. Same face, different eyes. Around 6, Maris showed up. She walked the pier like she owned it. Chin high, coat perfectly tailored, phone glued to her hand. She spotted me near the maintenance cart and smiled. Not the dinner smile, the other one, the one she used when she wanted to see if the leash still worked. "Hey," she said, like we were on good terms. "Didn't expect you to be here this late." I wiped my hands on a rag. "Work," she laughed softly. "You and that word." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Callum's coming by tonight. Big meeting. Try not to be weird, okay?" There it was, the preemptive warning. The assumption that my role was to not embarrass her. "I won't," I said. She studied my face, clearly dissatisfied with how little she could read it. "Good," she said, then leaned in and kissed my cheek. Her lips were cool, calculated. "I'll be busy," she added. "Don't wait up." I wasn't planning to. Her smile flickered again, just for a second. Then she turned and walked away, heels clicking against the boards. I watched her until she disappeared into the security office. At 7:30, the pier officially closed. At 8, the investor group arrived. 3 men in dark coats, 1 woman with a clipboard and a tight smile, and Callum Greer at the center of it all, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed like he was already picturing his name on the deed. Maris walked beside him, laughing at something he said. She touched his arm when she laughed. He didn't pull away. I stayed back, visible but unobtrusive. The help. The infrastructure guy. Callum glanced at me once, recognition flickering in his eyes. "Ah," he said, stopping mid-walk. "You're the maintenance guy, right?" "Safety supervisor," I corrected calmly. He smiled like I'd made a cute mistake. "Right. That." Maris shot me a look, a warning. Callum extended his hand. I shook it. His grip was firm, confident. The grip of a man used to closing deals and believing he'd won before the ink dried. "Good to meet you," he said. "Maris speaks highly of your dedication." Dedication. Another word people use when they don't want to say disposable. "Someone has to keep people alive," I said. He laughed, not realizing it wasn't a joke. They moved on, talking about lighting upgrades and brand opportunities. I followed at a distance, answering questions when asked, pointing out safety features like I was giving a tour to school kids. We reached the west end of the pier, the quieter stretch near the old funhouse. The mist had thickened here, swallowing sound. Callum stopped near the maintenance gate. "This area," he said, gesturing, "has potential. Private events, exclusive access." Maris nodded eagerly. "Exactly what I was thinking." "Of course you were," he said, smiling at her. I watched their reflections in the funhouse glass, two figures leaning toward each other. Intimate, comfortable, same place. Callum turned to me. "You don't mind if we take a quick look inside, do you?" "The funhouse is closed," I said. "Safety reasons." He raised an eyebrow. "We'll be careful." I met his gaze. "It's still closed." Maris laughed lightly. "Gideon, it's fine. They're investors." "And it's still closed," I repeated. For a moment, the air tightened. Callum's smile didn't drop, but something harder slid in behind it. "I'm sure we can make an exception," he said. "I'm sure we can't," I replied. The woman with the clipboard cleared her throat. "Perhaps we can revisit this later." Callum stared at me for a long beat, then shrugged. "Another time?" They moved on. Maris fell into step beside him, her voice low. I caught fragments. "He's been weird lately. Just ignore it." They didn't know I could still hear them. They reached the end of the pier and turned back, heading toward the security office. I slowed my pace deliberately. When they disappeared around the corner, I changed direction. I didn't follow them. I followed the place. I cut through a side corridor, unlocked a staff-only door, and entered the funhouse from the back. Inside, the air smelled like dust and old paint. Emergency lights cast long shadows across warped mirrors and narrow halls. Everything hummed faintly with power. I stood still and listened. Footsteps, laughter, Maris's laugh. They'd circled back. I moved deeper into the funhouse, keeping to the maintenance path. This wasn't trespassing. This was my workplace. The footsteps grew louder. Voices echoed strangely, bouncing off mirrors and walls. Callum's voice was easy to pick out. Confident, loud. "This place is creepy," he said. "You sure you want to rebrand it?" Maris laughed. "People love creepy when it's controlled." Then, closer now. "He won't come in here?" "Why not?" "Because he's obedient." That word again, obedient. Something inside me clicked into place. I stepped out from behind a support beam. Maris saw me first. Her face drained of color so fast it was almost impressive. Callum turned a second later. "What the hell?" he started. I didn't rush them. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood there, blocking the narrow exit behind me. "Funhouse is closed," I said calmly. "Safety reasons." Callum scoffed. "Relax, we're just—" "After hours," I continued, "unauthorized, and I have no record of permission." Maris took a step forward. "Gideon, don't do this." "Do what? Make a scene?" I glanced around at the empty corridors. "There's no one here." Callum's smile was gone now. "Listen, buddy, you're overstepping." I tilted my head. "Am I?" I gestured toward the wall-mounted camera, its red light blinking steadily. "That camera's been recording since 7:58, I said. "Time-stamped, audio too." Maris froze. Callum's eyes flicked toward the camera. "That footage belongs to the pier," I added. "Not me." Silence stretched. The funhouse hummed. Callum straightened his jacket. "You're trying to scare us." I stepped aside, just enough to clear the exit. "No, I'm asking you to leave." He hesitated, then moved forward, brushing past me with deliberate force. Shoulder to shoulder, not enough to knock me back, just enough to make a point. I didn't move. He paused, surprised. Up close, I could see the calculation in his eyes. The assessment. Was I a problem or a nuisance? Maris slipped past us, head down, not looking at either of us. Callum leaned in, his voice low. "You don't know how this works." I met his gaze. "I know exactly how it works." He smirked. "Then you should know you're replaceable." That one landed, not because it hurt, because it clarified. He turned and walked away. I watched them go, the echoes of their footsteps fading into the mist. I stood there alone in the funhouse, surrounded by warped reflections of myself. Replaceable, maybe, but not invisible. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another message from the unknown number. He thinks he can scare you. He's already planning something worse. Below it, a short audio clip. I didn't play it yet. I didn't need to. I already knew one thing for sure. Tomorrow night wasn't going to be about cheating anymore. It was going to be about survival. I didn't listen to the audio clip right away. That might sound strange, but there's a rhythm to bad information. If you take it all at once, it floods you. If you take it piece by piece, you can decide where to stand when the wave hits. I waited until I was back in my truck, parked at the far end of the lot where the pier lights thinned into shadow. The mist had turned the windshield into frosted glass. The ocean was invisible, but I could hear it breathing. I played the clip. At first there was laughter, too close to the microphone, distorted. Then Tessa's voice, unmistakable, sharp, amused. "Oh my God, don't worry," she said. "He won't do anything. He's not that guy." Another voice layered in, Maris, relaxed, confident. "If he tries something, Callum knows people. He can make Gideon look unstable. One complaint, one little incident at work, and suddenly he's unsafe. Problem solved." A pause. Then Callum's voice, lower, smoother. "Let him bark," he said. "Worst case, he loses his job. Best case, he embarrasses himself. Either way, he's done." The clip ended. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, not gripping it, not shaking, just holding it like it was something solid I could trust. They weren't afraid of me. That was the mistake. They weren't even angry at me. They were bored. I drove home slow. When you realize someone has already written your ending for you, the smartest thing you can do is stop rushing toward it. The house was dark when I walked in. Maris wasn't home yet. That didn't surprise me. I went straight to the spare room and locked the door for the first time since we'd moved in. Not because I was scared of her, because I was done pretending this was a shared space. I sat on the edge of the bed and replayed the clip again, this time with my eyes closed. I listened for details the way I listened for loose bolts or hairline cracks. Tone, confidence, timing. They'd planned this before I'd ever slept in the spare room, before the laugh, before I'd heard anything at all, which meant the cheating wasn't an accident either. It was a test, a way to see how much they could take without me breaking. And now that I wasn't breaking the way they expected, they were escalating. Good. Escalation creates pressure. Pressure makes people sloppy. The next morning, I didn't go straight to work. I went to a lawyer's office that smelled like burnt coffee and carpet cleaner. Her name was Mara Sloan, late 40s, calm eyes. No nonsense. The kind of person who didn't interrupt because she didn't need to. I told her everything. Not emotionally. Logically. Timeline. Names. What I had, what I didn't. She listened, took notes. Asked questions that mattered. When I played the audio, she didn't react at all. That was when I knew she was good. "Do you know who recorded this?" she asked. "I have a guess." "Guess is fine for now," she said. "Certainty comes later." She leaned back in her chair. "Here's the important part, Gideon. You don't confront anyone about this. Not your wife, not the developer, not the friends. You don't threaten, you don't warn, you don't hint." I nodded. She continued. "You protect your job, you document everything, you assume they're going to try exactly what they said they would. Make me look unstable." "Exactly." She slid a legal pad toward me. "Start writing everything down, dates, times, interactions, who was present, what was said, even the boring parts." "I already do that," I said. She smiled faintly. "Good. Most people don't." When I stood to leave, she added, "One more thing." "Yes?" "If they try to provoke you physically," she said, "walk away. Let them be the ones who lose control." I thought of Callum's shoulder brushing past mine in the funhouse. The deliberate pressure, the message. "I can do that," I said. On the way out, she stopped me again. "And Gideon?" "Yes?" "People who talk about control that openly usually can't stand losing it." That sat with me all the way back to the pier. At work, I became invisible on purpose. I did my rounds. I smiled when spoken to. I answered emails with neutral professionalism. I copied supervisors on routine updates. I logged maintenance checks in excruciating detail. If someone accused me of being careless now, they'd have to argue with timestamps. Maris didn't come by that day. Instead, Tessa did. She appeared near the maintenance office around mid-afternoon, sunglasses on, phone already out like she was documenting a wildlife sighting. "Well, if it isn't Harborlight's unsung hero," she said brightly. I didn't look up from the clipboard. "Can I help you?" She laughed. "Relax, I'm just waiting for Maris." "She's not here," Tessa pouted. "Shame. I was hoping we could all hang out. Clear the air." There's no air to clear. She tilted her head, studying me. You've changed. People do. Not usually this fast. I met her eyes for the first time. You didn't know me before? She smiled like that amused her. Oh, honey, we knew exactly who you were. There it was again. Obedient, predictable, safe. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. You're making things uncomfortable. For Maris, for Callum, for the pier. I work for the pier, I said. Not for Callum. Tessa waved that off. Same thing soon enough. I closed the clipboard. If you're here on personal business, you need to leave the maintenance area. Her smile tightened. See? That tone. That's the problem. She raised her phone slightly, not recording yet, but clearly considering it. Careful, she said softly. You don't want people thinking you're aggressive. I stared at the phone, then back at her. If you record me, make sure you get my good side. Her eyebrows lifted. Excuse me? I like consistency, I said. If you're collecting content. For the first time, Tessa looked uncertain. She laughed it off, but the sound was thinner. You're weird, Gideon. Noted. She walked away, heels sharp against the boards. I watched her go, then wrote down the interaction. Time, location, what was said. People always forget the paperwork. That evening, Maris came home late. She didn't bother with candles this time. No dinner, no soft voice. She stood in the doorway of the spare room, arms crossed. I talked to Tessa, she said. I'm sure you did. She frowned. She said you were hostile. I looked up from my laptop. Did she? Yes. She said you made her uncomfortable. I closed the laptop slowly. Did she mention she came into a restricted work area? Maris blinked. That's not the point. It is to me. She sighed dramatically. Why are you doing this? I stood up. I'm not doing anything. You're punishing me. No, I said. I stopped playing. Her eyes flashed. You think you're smarter than everyone else. I considered that. No, I think I'm finally paying attention. She laughed, sharp and humorless. You're going to lose everything if you keep this up. I stepped closer, not touching her, not raising my voice. Everything I lose, I said, will be because someone took it, not because I handed it over. For a moment, something like fear crossed her face. Then she scoffed. You're being dramatic again. Maybe. But drama is just truth with witnesses. She turned and walked away, slamming the bedroom door. I didn't follow. I went back to my laptop and played the audio clip again, this time transcribing it word for word. Because if they wanted to control the story, they were going to have to fight the facts first. And facts, once written down, don't care who laughs at them. By the end of that week, the house felt like a hotel we were both checking out of without telling the front desk. Maris stopped pretending. No more olive branches, no more soft resets. She moved through the rooms like I was furniture, there, but irrelevant. When she spoke to me, it was clipped, transactional, like she was documenting my existence in case she needed it later, which told me everything I needed to know. People don't ice you out unless they're preparing something. At the pier, things shifted in subtler ways. A supervisor asked me, casually, too casually, whether everything was okay at home. A board member forwarded me an email asking for clarification on a safety report I'd submitted weeks ago, one that had already been approved. Nothing overt, just pressure, just fingers testing the surface for cracks. I didn't give them any. I doubled down, logged everything, copied everyone, smiled when spoken to, went home alone. On Thursday afternoon, I got the call. Not from Maris, from HR. Gideon, the woman said, voice careful. We've received a concern. I leaned back in my chair. About? There's been a report suggesting you may have acted aggressively toward a visitor earlier this week. Callum? Of course. I let a beat pass. Not too long. Long enough to show I wasn't panicking. Can you be more specific? I asked. She hesitated. There was an allegation of intimidation. I pictured the funhouse, the camera, the timestamp. Was the incident dated Tuesday at approximately 8:15 p.m.? I asked. Another pause. Yes. And was it alleged to have occurred near the West End funhouse? Yes. Good, I said. Then you already have the footage. Silence. I documented the interaction, I continued. I also submitted a maintenance report for that area that night. You'll see my name on it. She cleared her throat. We'll review everything. I'd appreciate that, I said. Please include my supervisor. When the call ended, I didn't feel relief. I felt confirmation. They'd pulled the trigger exactly when and how they said they would, which meant they were predictable. That night, Maris came home earlier than usual. She stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, watching me rinse a coffee mug. "They called you," she said. "Yes." Her mouth tightened. "You didn't have to make this harder than it needed to be." I turned off the faucet. "You didn't have to try to destroy my job." Her eyes flicked away. "Just for a second." "I didn't," she said. "You planned to." She laughed, sharp and brittle. "You're paranoid." "Then you won't mind me letting them review the footage." She froze. There it was. The look of someone realizing the game board wasn't what they thought it was. "You think you're winning," she said quietly. "I'm not trying to win." "Then what are you trying to do?" I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, I felt nothing but distance. "I'm taking something off the table," I said. She stared at me. "What does that even mean?" "It means," I said, "you don't get to steer me anymore." Her face hardened. "You don't get to say that." "I just did." She stepped closer, eyes bright with anger. "You're nothing without me. Do you understand that? No one here knows you. No one cares about you. I built this life." I nodded. "You curated it." She slapped the counter. "Same thing." "No," I said. "A life that collapses when the audience turns away isn't built. It's staged." That night, she didn't sleep in the house. I knew because her car never came back. I knew because the silence felt different. Lighter. The next day, HR called again. This time, their tone was apologetic. "We reviewed the footage," they said, "and your documentation. There's no evidence supporting the complaint." "Understood. We consider the matter closed." "So do I." When I hung up, I didn't smile, because closure for me didn't mean the same thing it meant to them. At noon, I got another message from the unknown number. This time, it was longer. They're panicking. Callum's deal depends on the board's confidence. Maris is scrambling. They think you'll fold now that HR backed off. They think you'll want peace. I stared at the screen. Peace? That was the word people used when they wanted you to surrender quietly. I typed back for the first time. "I don't want peace." The reply came almost instantly. "Good. Then it's time." Attached was a folder, audio files, short videos, screenshots, Tessa's phone dump, the laugh, the control line, jokes about how easy I was. Voice notes from Maris mocking me for being attached, a clip where Callum joked about cleaning house at the pier. It wasn't illegal. It was worse. It was honest. I forwarded the folder to Mara Sloan with one line. "This just escalated." Her reply came 10 minutes later. "Do not share this publicly. Yet. We use it where it hurts most." I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. Outside, the pier buzzed with preparation. Tomorrow night was the Harborlight relaunch gala, the event Maris had poured months into. Press, donors, board members, live-streamed speeches, the future on display, her future, Callum's future. They'd chosen the stage themselves. All I had to do was let them perform. That evening, Maris finally texted me. "We need to talk before tomorrow." I stared at the message. Then I replied, "No." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. "You're making a mistake." I set the phone down and went to bed. I slept better than I had in weeks. The night of the gala came with clear skies and sharp wind. The pier lit up like it was pretending to be younger than it was. String lights, spotlights, music floating over the water, a crowd that smelled like money and expectation. I arrived early in my work jacket, carrying a clipboard. Invisible. Perfect. Maris was everywhere at once. Greeting donors, laughing on cue, touching arms, managing optics like a conductor. She didn't look at me. Callum arrived to applause. He shook hands, smiled for cameras, spoke to the board like he already owned the place. At 8:30, the speeches began. At 8:45, I walked into the security room and stood beside Rafi. "You good?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Just keep the feeds rolling." He glanced at me. "Something's going down, isn't it?" "Just make sure it's recorded." At 9, Callum took the microphone. He spoke about vision, about revitalization, about control, though he didn't use the word. Behind him, the pier stretched into darkness, lights flickering against the ocean. I watched Maris in the crowd. She was smiling, confident, certain. I checked my watch. Right on time. Because people who think they're in control never notice the moment the floor shifts. And when it does, they fall all the way down. Callum was still talking when the first crack appeared. It wasn't dramatic, no shouting, no interruption. Just a subtle change in the room, like when a generator stutters for half a second and everyone pretends they didn't notice. I noticed, because Maris noticed. Her smile, perfect up to that point, froze, then recalibrated. Her eyes flicked toward the side of the pier where the security monitors were housed, then back to Callum, then scanned the crowd the way a pilot scans instruments when turbulence hits without warning. She was looking for me. She didn't see me. That was the second mistake. Callum wrapped up his speech to applause and stepped away from the microphone, basking in it like warmth. Board members leaned toward him. Donors nodded. Phones came out. Photos were taken. This was the moment he thought he'd won. I moved, not fast, not slow. Just when the rhythm of the event made space for someone like me to pass unnoticed. I didn't go toward the stage, I went behind it. The pier's operations corridor runs parallel to the main boardwalk, hidden behind service doors marked staff only. I'd walked it thousands of times. Tonight, it hummed with electricity and anticipation. At the end of the corridor was a small door leading up to the Ferris wheel control platform. Not the ride itself, just the booth where technicians monitor power flow and emergency stops. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The sound of the gala dulled, muffled by metal and glass. Out here, the wind was louder. The ocean slapped the pilings below like it was impatient. I took out my phone. One message to Mara. Proceeding. Her reply came almost instantly. Stay calm. Let them expose themselves. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and waited. I didn't have to wait long. The door burst open. Callum Greer filled the frame, breath sharp, smile gone. His jacket was unbuttoned now. His face was flushed, not with anger yet, but with disbelief. You think this is funny? He demanded. I didn't turn around right away. Below us, the gala continued. Music, laughter, applause for someone else now. I think, I said calmly, you shouldn't be up here. He scoffed. You don't tell me where I can and can't be. I do, I replied. This is restricted access. He stepped closer. Too close. I could smell his cologne, expensive and aggressive. You pulled a stunt, he said. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're done. I already talked to the board. I finally turned to face him. Up close, without the crowd and the lights, he looked smaller. Still dangerous, but smaller. I know, I said. I copied them. He blinked. What? The board, I continued. HR, legal, the pier's insurer. His jaw tightened. You're bluffing. I met his eyes. Check your phone. He hesitated, then pulled it out. I watched his face change as notifications stacked up. Emails, messages, missed calls. Confusion first, then anger, then something like panic. You had no right, he said, voice dropping. That audio, those clips, those were private. They were honest, I said. There's a difference. You manipulated this, he snapped. You provoked me. No, I said. I documented you. He laughed, but it came out wrong. You think a few recordings ruin me. I think, I said, they ruin the version of you that exists in other people's heads. Below us, the Ferris wheel lights flickered as it powered up for the evening ride, a symbolic gesture for donors. Slow rotation, predictable arc. Callum took a step closer again, anger finally boiling over. You don't understand how this works, he said. People like you don't get to decide outcomes. I didn't move. You're right, I said. People like me keep places from collapsing while people like you sell the illusion that they won't. He reached out, grabbed my jacket. That was the third mistake. I didn't hit him. I didn't shove him off anything dramatic. I did something simpler. I stepped back, out of his reach, and raised my voice just enough. Don't touch me, I said, clear, calm, loud enough to carry. Behind him, the door to the platform opened again. Maris stood there. Her face was pale now. Not angry, not confident, afraid. Callum, she said sharply. Stop. He turned toward her. This isn't over. She ignored him and looked at me instead. For the first time since the restaurant, she didn't smile. What did you do? She whispered. I looked at her the way you look at someone who finally realizes the ground is gone. I took the one thing you thought you controlled, I said, and then I removed the audience that made it work. Her mouth opened, closed. You're destroying everything, she said. No, I replied. I stopped maintaining the lie. Below us, a murmur rippled through the crowd. Phones rose higher. Someone was reading something on a screen. Board members were moving together, heads close. Maris followed my gaze downward. She saw it. The shift. The moment the story stopped belonging to her. She stepped toward me, voice dropping into that familiar, intimate tone. Gideon, we can fix this. You don't have to do this. There it was. The one simple thing. The soft voice, the promise of warmth, the reset button. I felt nothing. I already did, I said. Callum cursed under his breath and shoved past her toward the stairs. Security met him halfway up. Not dramatic, not violent, professional. Sir, one of them said, we need you to come with us. Callum shouted something then, about lawsuits, about power, about regret, but it didn't matter anymore. His voice was just noise. Maris watched him go, then turned back to me, eyes wet now. You loved me, she said. I loved the version of you that didn't laugh at me, I replied. Below us, the gala continued, but differently now, quieter, edgier, conversations sharp with curiosity. I walked past her toward the stairs. Gideon, she called after me, voice cracking. You can't just walk away. I stopped at the top step and looked back one last time. I already did, I said. Then I descended into the light, into the noise, into the aftermath. Behind me, the Ferris wheel kept turning. But the ride was over. I didn't make it all the way down the stairs before Maris caught up to me. She grabbed my sleeve, harder than she probably meant to, but not hard enough to bruise, not hard enough to leave evidence. She was still thinking in those terms. What could be denied later? Gideon, she said, breathless now. Please, don't do this here. I stopped, not because of her hand, but because of the way she said here. Here meant in front of witnesses. Here meant where the story could escape her. I looked down at her hand on my sleeve. She let go like she'd touched something electric. What do you want? I asked. Her eyes darted past me, down the stairs, toward the glow of the gala, toward the people who were starting to understand that something had gone wrong. Not this, she said. Not like this. Like what? I asked. Accurately. She swallowed. You're humiliating me. That word finally landed where it was supposed to. Now you know how it feels, I said. She shook her head, almost laughing through tears. This isn't the same. You're overreacting. I leaned closer, not threatening, not loud, just close enough that she had to look at me and not past me. You laughed about controlling me, I said quietly. Out loud, with your friends. You made me a punchline. Her mouth opened, then closed again. I was joking, she said weakly. No, I replied. You were confident. Below us, a flash went off. Someone took a photo of the board members huddled together. Another flash. Another. The narrative was moving now, like a train that had left the station. Maris saw it happening. I could tell by the way her breathing sped up, by the way her eyes kept flicking from face to face in the crowd below, calculating angles, imagining headlines. She reached for me again, but this time not with her hand, with her voice. You don't have to do this, she said softly. We can talk. We can go home. We can... No, I said. The word didn't echo. It didn't need to. Her face crumpled, not into sadness, but into something closer to panic. You think this makes you strong, she hissed. You think anyone here will side with you? I looked past her, down at the gala floor. People weren't looking at me. They were looking at her. At Callum being escorted away by security, his jaw tight, his confidence leaking out of him step by step. At board members whispering behind their hands. At phones lighting up with messages they hadn't expected to receive tonight. I don't need sides, I said. I needed visibility. She stared at me like she was finally seeing a stranger. You planned this, she said. Yes. Her laugh burst out then, sharp, ugly, breaking. You're sick. I shrugged. I adapted. That was when the shouting started. Callum's voice carried on the wind, echoing from somewhere near the pier entrance. This isn't over, you hear me? This place is nothing without me. The crowd turned as one. Security tightened their grip on him, but he kept going, louder now, angrier. She set this up, he shouted, pointing wildly back toward Maris. She told me he was harmless. She told me he was easy to control. The words hit the crowd like a dropped tray of glass. Maris froze. Slowly, too slowly, she turned toward the sound. Every face in the immediate radius pivoted with her. This was the moment she would replay in her head for the rest of her life, whether she admitted it or not. Callum, red-faced, furious, unraveling in public. Her reputation, carefully curated, filtered, managed, standing naked in the cold. I didn't say that, she shouted back, too fast, too desperate. Callum laughed, a wild, broken sound. Ah, you said it all the time. Phones came up. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. Maris turned back to me, eyes wide, shining with something close to terror. "Fix this," she said. "Please. You can still fix this." I shook my head. That was never my job. Below us, Callum was being pulled toward the exit now, his words slurring together, threats dissolving into noise. The board chair stepped up to the microphone, unplanned, unsmiling. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice tight, "we're going to pause the evening's program." A murmur rolled through the crowd. Maris made a small sound in her throat like she'd been punched. "This isn't happening," she whispered. I stepped past her and started down the stairs again. She didn't follow this time. Halfway down, I heard her call my name, loud now, cracking, stripped of polish. "Gideon." I stopped, but I didn't turn around. "You think this ends tonight?" she shouted. "You think you've won?" I considered that. Then I answered, clear enough for the nearest people to hear. "I think it ends exactly where you started laughing." The wind picked up, rattling the string lights overhead. Somewhere, an alarm chirped briefly. Someone had tripped a restricted gate in the confusion. Security moved fast. The gala dissolved into clusters of hushed conversations and frantic typing. I walked through it all like I belonged there, because I did. At the edge of the pier, near the maintenance gate, I stopped and looked back one last time. Maris stood frozen near the stairs, alone now, her friends nowhere to be seen. Her phone was pressed to her ear, but whatever she was saying wasn't working. Behind her, the Ferris wheel completed another slow rotation, lights blinking against the dark water. A ride that only looks graceful when you don't notice how mechanical it is. I pushed open the gate and stepped into the service corridor. The noise of the gala dulled behind me. The ocean was loud again, honest. As I walked away, my phone buzzed once. A message from Mara. "It's done. Leave." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I reached my truck, climbed in, and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, Harborlight Pier glowed against the night, bright, exposed, and suddenly very real. I drove off before the lights could dim, before anyone could ask me to explain, before she could find another lever, and I didn't look back. I should have driven away. That was the clean ending. Engine on. Distance gained, control reclaimed. But revenge doesn't end clean when the people you're leaving behind still believe they can grab you by the collar of the past and drag you back. I'd barely reached the service road when my phone rang. Unknown number again. I didn't answer. It rang a second time, then a third. I pulled over beneath a darkened street lamp where the light didn't quite reach the asphalt and answered without speaking. "You think you're clever," Callum said. His voice was hoarse, breathing hard, wind in the background. I checked my mirrors. Empty. "You think this is over because you embarrassed me," he continued. "But embarrassment fades, power doesn't." I looked ahead at the road stretching into darkness. "You're not supposed to be calling me," he laughed, ugly. "I'm not calling to negotiate." I finally spoke. "Where are you?" A pause. Then, "You really don't know when to stop." "I do," I said. "I stop when things get stupid." His breath hitched. "Meet me." I smiled despite myself. "No." "You don't get a choice," he snapped. "Your truck is easy to recognize. Maintenance stickers, scratches on the bumper. I've been watching where you park for weeks." Weeks. There it was again. The quiet confidence of someone who thought observation was ownership. "You're bluffing," I said. "Am I?" he replied. "Check your mirrors again." I did. Headlights flared to life behind me. Too close, too sudden. My pulse kicked. Not with fear, but with clarity. "You should leave," I said. "Now." "You took something from me tonight," Callum said. "I'm taking something back." I hung up. The truck behind me revved and surged forward. I pulled back onto the road, steady, controlled. No panic acceleration, no swerving, just movement. The pier was behind us now, but its access roads twisted like veins. Narrow lanes, service turnoffs, blind ends I knew better than anyone who'd only ever visited as a guest. Callum's headlights stayed close. He wanted me rattled. I didn't give him the satisfaction. I took the first service turn, cutting toward the old storage lots near the west end. Places marked private, places he thought were empty. He followed. Of course he did. The road narrowed, gravel crunching beneath my tires. Wind whipped in from the water, carrying the smell of rust and seaweed. I slowed. He didn't. His truck clipped my bumper, just enough to be felt, not enough to be accidental. I stopped. Hard. His headlights flooded my cab. For a moment, everything went white. Then quiet. I stepped out slowly, hands visible. Callum slammed his door and came at me like he'd been waiting all night for permission. "You think you can humiliate me and just walk away?" he shouted. "You think anyone will remember you tomorrow?" I stood still. "People will remember tonight," I said. "They won't remember your excuses." He laughed and shoved me. Not hard, not yet. I staggered back a step and planted my feet. "You should stop," I said. "Or what?" he demanded. I didn't answer. I reached behind me and flipped the switch on the portable floodlights mounted to the storage building wall. The lot exploded into light. Bright, white, unforgiving. Cameras hummed to life. Publicly posted, clearly marked, not hidden, not illegal. Callum froze. Behind him, another engine approached, then another. Security trucks. Raffi's voice cut through the night. "That's enough!" Callum spun, wild-eyed. I leaned in close, not threatening, not shouting, just close enough that he had to hear me over his own breathing. "You followed me," I said. "You hit my vehicle. You put your hands on me. And you did it where everything works." His face drained of color. "This isn't finished," he said weakly. "It is," I replied. "You just didn't notice when." Security grabbed his arms. He resisted, just enough to look bad, not enough to look brave. As they pulled him away, he twisted back toward me. "She said you were controllable," he spat. "She said you'd never do anything." I met his eyes. "She was wrong," I said. They shoved him into the truck and drove off, lights flashing against the storage walls like a heartbeat finally slowing. The lot went quiet again. Raffi walked up beside me. "You okay?" I nodded. "I am now." He glanced toward the road. "You want me to file the report?" "Yes," I said. "All of it." He clapped my shoulder once, quick, solid, and walked away. I stood alone for a moment, the floodlights still blazing. My phone buzzed. Maris. I didn't answer. It buzzed again and again. I blocked the number. Then I turned off the lights, got back in my truck, and drove. Not fast, not angry, just forward. Behind me, Harborlight Pier stood stripped of illusion, its lights no longer romantic. Just exposed steel and aging wood holding itself together without applause. Exactly like me. And that was the last night anyone tried to control me with one simple thing. Because once the leash is gone, there's nothing left to pull. I didn't go home. That place stopped being mine the moment Maris learned she couldn't pull me by the throat anymore. Houses like that don't turn quiet. They echo, they wait. They try to lure you back into rooms where you already lost yourself once. So I drove. Not far, just far enough to think without being hunted by memories. I parked near the eastern breakwater where the pier lights don't quite reach and shut the engine off. The ocean was loud here, slamming itself against the rocks like it was arguing with God. My phone buzzed again. Not Maris, a number I recognized now. "Mara Sloan," I answered. "It escalated," she said calmly, like she was noting the weather. "But in a way that helps you." "He followed me," I said. "Hit my truck. Put hands on me." "I know," she replied. "Security already sent the preliminary report. Cameras caught everything." I closed my eyes for a second. "What happens now?" "What should have happened earlier," she said. "You stop engaging, they keep unraveling." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Your wife called my office," Mara added. "Twice." That made me laugh. Not a nice laugh, a dry one. "And?" "She wanted to talk. She wanted to clarify context. She wanted to know what you'd told me." "And you told her?" "That my client communicates in writing now." "Good." I hung up and sat there until the adrenaline drained enough for my hands to stop buzzing. Then my phone buzzed again. A voicemail notification. Blocked number. I didn't listen. I already knew what it would sound like. Anger wrapped in desperation, the same way affection used to be wrapped around control. I deleted it. The next morning, I woke up in my truck with a stiff neck and a sense of finality I hadn't felt in years. I went to work. That part surprised me. But work is where the truth lives. Work doesn't care who you sleep with. It cares whether the bolts are tight and the exits open. At Harborlight, the pier looked different. Quieter, stripped, not broken, just honest. People were whispering, but not about me, about Callum, about the deal that vanished overnight, about the board emergency meeting scheduled for noon, about Maris leaving early, eyes red, phone glued to her hand. When I walked into the maintenance office, no one looked away. They looked relieved. Raffi met me by the door. "You're a legend now," he said. I shook my head. "No, I'm just still standing. He smirked. That's enough around here. At 10:30, HR called again. This time they asked me to come upstairs. The conference room was full. Board members, legal, HR, the insurer's representative. Maris was not there. Callum was not there. I took a seat and folded my hands on the table. No speech, no performance. They talked, they reviewed footage, they listened to audio clips I'd already memorized, they discussed reputational risk and conflict of interest and inappropriate conduct. At one point, the board chair looked directly at me. You did everything correctly, he said. Under circumstances that would have broken most people. I nodded. I did my job. Yes, he said. You did. That was it. No apology, no parade, just acknowledgement, which was more than I'd ever needed. When I left the room, Maris was waiting in the hallway. She looked smaller without the lights and the crowd and the illusion of control propping her up. Her makeup was perfect. Her eyes were not. Please, she said before I could pass her. Just 5 minutes. I stopped. Not because she deserved it, because I wanted to hear the last lie she'd try to sell me. You ruined everything, she said, voice trembling. Do you understand that? You ruined it yourself, I replied. She shook her head. I was bored. That's all. You were safe, predictable. I needed to feel desired. And you chose humiliation, I said. Her voice broke. I never thought you'd fight back. That was the truest thing she'd said all year. You laughed, I reminded her. That's what changed everything. She swallowed. I didn't mean it. Yes, I said, you did. Her hand reached out, then stopped halfway, like her body finally understood the new rules. What happens now? She asked. I looked at her, not with anger, with closure. You live with the version of yourself everyone else just met, I said. Then I walked past her. Outside, the pier was waking up for the day. Workers unlocking gates, vendors prepping carts, gulls screaming like they always did, life continuing. My phone buzzed one last time. Unknown number. I didn't answer. I deleted it. And as I walked the length of Harborlight Pier, past the rides, past the lights, past the place where I'd been laughed at and reduced to a lever, I felt something settle into place. Not peace. Power doesn't come with peace. It comes with weight, and I carried it without apology. Because the moment I took that one simple thing off the table, the game ended, and I walked away while they were still trying to play. The story didn't end when I walked away. That's the lie people like Maris always believe. That the moment they lose the stage, the play is over. That once the lights dim, no one's watching anymore. But control addicts don't quit cold, they relapse. The morning after the board meeting, I woke up to a silence that felt engineered. No calls, no texts, no frantic messages leaking through blocked numbers. That kind of quiet isn't peace, it's calibration. I knew Maris was doing what she'd always done best, rewriting the narrative before anyone else could finish reading it. I saw the first sign of it at lunch. A local blog ran a piece titled Something Careful and Slippery. Tensions at Harborlight, behind the scenes of a troubled relaunch. No names in the headline, no accusations, just implication, suggestion, and a familiar tone of sympathy for those caught in the crossfire of personal and professional conflict. I didn't have to read far to know whose voice was shaping it. Anonymous sources, emotional strain, a dedicated marketing professional blindsided by her husband's sudden behavioral changes, mentions of obsessive documentation, fixation, and a concerning need for control. That last one almost made me laugh. She'd flipped it. Of course she had. Control was her native language. She could weaponize it from any angle. I closed the article and went back to work. That part mattered, because nothing unnerves a liar more than the person they're lying about refusing to react. By mid-afternoon, the whispers had reached the pier. Not loud, not confrontational, just careful questions dressed up as concern. You holding up okay, man? Must have been stressful. Hope you're taking care of yourself. I thanked them. I smiled. I didn't explain. Every explanation is an opening. Maris called Mara's office again that evening. This time, she didn't ask for clarification. She demanded mediation. She's trying to force contact, Mara told me later. That's a mistake. It always was, I said. Do you want me to shut it down? Yes, I replied. Formally. That word matters. It builds walls. The next move came faster. A mutual friend, someone who'd always hovered at the edges of our marriage, careful never to choose a side, texted me that night. She's not doing well. You should talk to her. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I deleted it. Because I recognized the tactic. Maris wasn't trying to win me back. She was trying to restore access. If she could get me alone, if she could make me talk, if she could pull even one emotional thread loose, she could start weaving again. She didn't understand that the loom was gone. The following afternoon, I got the call I'd been expecting. Callum, not from his old number, from a new one. I answered this time. "You cost me everything," he said without preamble. His voice sounded different now, thinner, scraped raw by the kind of nights where sleep doesn't come. "You did that yourself," I replied. "You think this ends with me?" he snapped. "You think she's done?" "No," I said calmly. "I think she's desperate." A sharp breath on the other end. "She told me you were nothing," he said. "She told me you were safe, predictable, that if things got ugly, you'd fold." I smiled, just a little. "She told you what she needed you to believe," I said. "Same as me." Silence stretched. Then, quieter. "She's blaming me?" "I know." "She says you manipulated her, that you planned everything." "I planned my exit," I said. "She planned your replacement." He swallowed. I could hear it. "You want to scare me?" he asked. "You already did." "I didn't call to scare you," I replied. "I answered because I wanted you to hear something." "What?" "You were never special," I said. "You were convenient." That one landed. He didn't argue, didn't threaten, didn't posture. He just hung up. That was the last time Callum Greer tried to matter. Maris, on the other hand, wasn't done. 2 days later, she showed up at the pier. Not for work. For me. She waited near the maintenance office like she'd done it 100 times before. Arms crossed, posture composed, face arranged into something carefully fragile. I saw her before she saw me. I considered turning around. Then I decided I didn't owe her avoidance. I walked past her without slowing. "Gideon," she said, voice catching just right. "Please." I stopped. Didn't turn. "What?" I asked. "They're saying things about me," she said. "Things you could correct." I faced her then. She looked tired. Not in a human way. In a hollow way. "You laughed," I said. "That's what they're hearing now." Her eyes flashed. I was venting. "No," I replied. "You were boasting." She stepped closer. Lowered her voice. "If you wanted power, you got it. Isn't that enough?" Power. She still thought that's what this was. "This isn't power," I said. "This is absence." She frowned. "What does that even mean?" "It means," I said, "you don't get access to me anymore. Not emotionally, not narratively, not privately." She shook her head slowly, disbelief giving way to anger. "You're enjoying this." "No," I said. "I'm done with you." That was when the mask finally shattered. "You think anyone believes you?" she hissed. "You think you come out of this clean?" I leaned in just enough that she could hear me over the wind. "I don't need clean," I said. "I needed you exposed." Her breath caught. "You used intimacy like a leash," I continued. You used ridicule as reinforcement. You laughed about it because you were sure I'd never see you clearly." I straightened. Now everyone does. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Then she laughed. Not the old laugh, not the confident one. This was brittle, fractured. "You think you won," she said. "But I'll always be the one people listen to." I shook my head. "No. You'll always be the one people watch." I walked away. Behind me, she said my name again. Angrier now, louder. But I didn't stop. That was the moment she lost. Not when Callum was dragged away. Not when the board turned cold. But when she realized she could scream my name into the wind and it didn't pull me back. Because control only exists where attention lives. And mine was gone. By the time I reached the end of the pier, the sun was dropping low over the water, staining everything copper and red. The lights flickered on automatically, one by one. I stood there for a moment, listening to the ocean, feeling the weight of the last few weeks settle into something solid and permanent. Maris would keep talking. She would keep reframing. She would keep trying to turn humiliation into martyrdom. But she would do it without me. And that was the revenge she never saw coming. She didn't stop. That was the thing people never understand about someone like Maris. They don't retreat when they lose. They circle. They look for a softer angle, a darker corner, a place where the rules feel less clear. 2 days after she confronted me at the pier, she tried a new tactic. She didn't come to me. She came to my space. I was finishing up a late inspection near the storage sheds on the East End, routine stuff, end-of-day checks, when I saw her car parked where it absolutely didn't belong. Not crooked, not rushed, placed carefully like a statement. She was sitting on the hood when I approached, legs crossed, coat draped just right, phone face down beside her. Waiting. I stopped a few steps away and said nothing. Silence unnerves people who rely on dialogue to dominate. "You look tired," she said finally, like she was opening a casual conversation with a stranger. "Move your car," I replied. "This is a restricted area." She smiled, still hiding behind rules. "I'm standing behind them," I said. "There's a difference." She slid off the hood and took a slow step toward me. Not seductive, not aggressive, measured. "I talked to Callum," she said. "I know." That threw her, just a little. "He's spiraling," she continued. "He's blaming me. He's telling people things." "I'm sure he is." She studied my face, trying to read something. Anger, jealousy, regret. She found nothing. "You could stop this," she said. "One conversation, one statement. You don't even have to defend me. Just soften it." I laughed then. Not loud, just enough to surprise her. "You still think this is about managing perception?" I said. "That's adorable." Her eyes hardened. "You're not as innocent as you want people to believe?" I stepped closer. Not invading, not threatening, just close enough that the distance disappeared. "I never claimed innocence," I said. "I claimed accuracy." Ugh, she exhaled sharply. "You're enjoying watching him break." "No," I replied. "I'm making sure he doesn't recover near me." That was when she tried the last card she had. Don't scream, not tears, threat. "If you don't rein this in," she said quietly, "I can make things very uncomfortable for you." I tilted my head. "Go on." "I know things about you," she said. "Things you wouldn't want public?" I nodded. "So do I." Her lips parted. "You think you scare me?" I leaned in, voice low and even. "I think you're standing in a place where everything is recorded, everything is logged, and everything you say becomes part of a pattern." She glanced around for the first time, at the cameras, the posted signs, the wide-open lot. "You followed me," she snapped. "You came here?" I corrected. Her jaw clenched. "I loved you," she said suddenly, too fast. I held her gaze. "You loved controlling me." She flinched like the words had weight. "I loved who you were when I could turn you," she shot back, "when you needed me." That was the truth, and it landed softer than I expected. "Move your car," I said again. For a moment, I thought she might refuse. Instead, she grabbed her phone, unlocked the car, and got in without another word. Tires crunched against gravel as she pulled away, leaving the space suddenly empty. I stood there long after she disappeared. Not shaken, clarified. That night, Callum tried again. This time, he didn't call. He came to the pier. Not during business hours, not for a meeting. He waited. I saw him near the old ticket booth. Hands in pockets, shoulders hunched, confidence finally stripped down to something raw and human. I approached slowly. He looked up, eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched like he'd been grinding it for days. "I'm not here to fight," he said quickly. "I'm here to understand." I stopped a few feet away. "You should leave." "I lost everything," he said. "Do you hear me? Deals, partners, access. She's telling people I went rogue." I nodded. "That tracks." "She set me up," he said, voice breaking now. "She fed me confidence, told me you were weak, that you'd fold." I studied him, really studied him. This wasn't the man from the gala, not the smug developer, not the predator. This was what was left when the illusion burned off. "You followed me," I said. "You hit my truck. You put your hands on me." He swallowed. "I know." "You don't get absolution for regret," I said. "You get distance." "I just want her to stop," he said. "I want her out of my head." I stepped closer. Not threatening. Final. "She doesn't stop," I said. "She replaces." He looked up at me, eyes wide. "That's the part you don't understand yet," I continued. "You weren't the affair. You were the lever." Something collapsed in his face. I turned away. "Don't come back," I said. "If you do, it won't be a conversation." He didn't follow. Behind me, the pier lights buzzed, steady and indifferent. I walked the length of Harborlight alone, every board familiar beneath my feet. I wasn't angry anymore. Oh, I wasn't even satisfied. I was finished. And that scared them more than anything else I could have done. Because people who still hate you can be pulled back. People who are done, they don't feel the leash anymore, and they never come when you tug. The funny thing about being finished is that the world doesn't notice right away. People expect noise when something ends. Shouting, doors slamming, public declarations. They don't recognize the quieter shift, the moment when a person stops orbiting someone else's gravity and begins moving on a straight line. Maris noticed. She just didn't understand what she was seeing. The next week unfolded like a bad echo. She tried angles she'd never needed before, because the old ones had always worked. Mutual friends reached out with carefully phrased concern. A distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in years sent a message asking if I was okay. Someone from the pier forwarded me a screenshot of a comment thread where my name floated through speculation like a rumor that refused to settle. I didn't answer any of it. Silence isn't empty. It's selective. Maris, on the other hand, talked. She talked to anyone who would listen. She framed, she softened, she sharpened, she rewrote. In her version, I was a man who had changed suddenly. A man who'd become cold, obsessive, fixated on control. She spoke in therapy language she'd learned just well enough to misuse. Words like boundaries and emotional safety bent into weapons. What she couldn't explain was why none of it pulled me back. That's when she made her biggest mistake. She tried to corner me publicly, not at the pier. She'd learned her lesson there. At a fundraiser downtown, one she hadn't planned, one she assumed I wouldn't attend. She was wrong. I didn't go for her. I went because it was on my calendar long before all of this started, and because showing up without fear is its own kind of statement. The venue was a restored warehouse. Brick walls, exposed beams, lighting carefully designed to look accidental. The kind of place people like Maris loved because it made them feel authentic without requiring honesty. I arrived alone. Not hiding, not scanning, just present. I felt her notice me before I saw her. The shift in the room, the subtle tightening of conversations, the way attention bent, then pretended it hadn't. She approached with a glass in her hand and a smile already in place. "Of course you're here," she said lightly. "You always loved these things." I looked at her. "I love consistency." Her smile twitched. "We should talk." "We've talked enough." "Not like this," she insisted, gesturing vaguely around us. "People are watching." "Yes," I said. "They are." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You're punishing me." "No," I replied. "I stopped protecting you." Her eyes flashed. "You don't get to decide that." I tilted my head. "I just did." She inhaled sharply, then changed tactics mid-breath. I recognized the move. I'd seen it 100 times. Soft voice, hurt eyes. "I never meant to hurt you," she said. I almost laughed. "You meant to use me," I said quietly. "Hurting me was collateral." Her mouth tightened. "You're cruel." "No," I said. "I'm accurate." A couple nearby had gone quiet. Not eavesdropping exactly, just listening. Maris noticed. Her posture straightened. Her voice rose just enough to carry. "I tried to help you," she said. "You were spiraling." That was the line she'd practiced. I nodded slowly. "That's interesting." Her brow furrowed. "What is?" "That's not the story you told Callum," I said. The name landed like a dropped glass. Her eyes flicked around, too fast, too sharp. "You shouldn't be saying that," she hissed. "I'm not saying anything," I replied. "I'm standing here." Her face flushed. "You're trying to provoke me." "No," I said. "You're trying to provoke me. I stopped playing." She stared at me, truly stared, like she was finally grasping the shape of what she'd lost. "Say something," she demanded. "Defend yourself. Deny it. Fight." I shook my head. "I don't need to." That was when she did something I didn't expect. She laughed. Not the confident laugh. Not the brittle one. A short, sharp sound that came from frustration rather than amusement. "You think silence makes you powerful," she said. "It makes you suspicious." I leaned in slightly, not enough to threaten, just enough to end the performance. "Silence doesn't make me powerful," I said. "It makes you loud." Her eyes widened. I straightened, picked up my drink, and stepped away. Behind me, she stood frozen, surrounded by people who were suddenly very aware that something had gone wrong. I didn't look back. The next move wasn't hers. It was Callum's. He sent an email. Not to me, to the board, to the Pier's investors, to anyone who'd once shaken his hand. It was long, rambling, defensive. He blamed Maris. He blamed stress. He blamed miscommunication. He didn't realize that explanations only work when people still trust your judgment. By the time the email finished circulating, it wasn't clarifying anything. It was confirming everything. Maris called me that night, from a number I hadn't blocked yet. I let it ring. She left a voicemail, not crying, not angry, controlled. "You think you've buried me," she said. "You haven't. You've just made me more careful." I deleted it. Because careful people don't leave voicemails like that. The final confrontation came a week later. Not dramatic, not public. I was locking up the maintenance office when I saw her car pull in. Slowly, deliberately. She stepped out, empty-handed, no phone in sight. "This ends tonight," she said as she approached. "It already ended," I replied. She stopped a few feet away. The distance felt intentional. "You think you broke me," she said. "You didn't." "I know," I said. "You're still talking." Her lips curled. "I can still hurt you." I met her gaze. "You already did, and you used up the privilege." She shook her head. "You don't understand. I know things. I've told people things." "I'm sure you have." "You're not worried?" she asked. I considered that, then answered honestly, "No." She stared at me, searching for the crack. There wasn't one. "You loved me," she said quietly. "I loved who I thought you were," I replied. "That person doesn't exist." She stepped back like she'd been struck. For a moment, just one, I thought she might finally say something real. Instead, she smiled. Cold, controlled, familiar. "This isn't over," she said. I locked the door and turned away. "It is for me," I said. And that's the only ending I needed. As I walked down the pier for the last time that night, the board solid beneath my feet, the ocean steady and indifferent beside me, I understood something with absolute clarity. She would keep telling stories. She would keep rearranging facts. She would keep looking for leverage. But she would never touch me again. Because the moment I stopped reacting, she lost the only thing she'd ever truly controlled. And I carried that knowledge with me as I disappeared into the dark, leaving her alone under the lights, still talking, still performing, still waiting for an audience that had already moved on. I thought that would be the end of it, that once a person realizes they've lost access, they stop knocking. But Maris had never understood access as permission. To her, access was something you took, then justified later with a story about love or concern or history. So when she stopped talking to me directly, I knew she was building something else. The silence changed texture. It stopped being loud and became busy. People at the pier started acting differently around me. Not hostile, not suspicious, just cautious in a way that felt rehearsed. Conversations paused when I walked into a room. Jokes ended a beat early. Someone I barely knew asked if I was getting support. Support. Another one of her favorite words. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't ask questions. I watched. Patterns don't lie. People do. It took 3 days for the shape of it to appear. An anonymous complaint. Not to HR this time. To the city. Not about violence. Not about threats. About safety culture. The phrasing was careful, almost admiring, praising my dedication while expressing concern about rigidity, obsession with control, and inflexibility that could create risk. Risk. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so predictable. The city inspector showed up on a Wednesday morning with a clipboard and a neutral expression. He didn't accuse. He observed, asked questions, took notes. I answered everything calmly, provided documentation, walked him through procedures, showed logs going back years. He nodded a lot. Before he left, he said something interesting. "This complaint," he said, tapping the folder, "was very detailed." I met his eyes. "She likes to sound informed." He paused. "She?" I shrugged. "Just a guess." He didn't smile, but his eyes softened slightly. "That afternoon," Mara called. "She's escalating sideways now," she said, "trying to make you look structurally unsafe instead of emotionally unstable." I figured. "She's hoping volume replaces evidence." "Does it work?" "Only on people who panic," Mara replied. "You're not panicking." "No," I said. "I'm counting." That night, I found the email draft. It wasn't sent yet. That was the part she'd underestimated. Maris had always assumed I wouldn't look, wouldn't check, wouldn't verify. But I knew her rhythms, her tells. I logged into the shared cloud account she'd forgotten to remove me from. Not because she was careless, but because she never believed I'd use it. There it was. A letter addressed to the pier board, the city council, and concerned community members. Carefully worded, polished, emotional without being dramatic. It framed her as a professional forced into silence by a husband whose need for control had begun to bleed into public spaces. It referenced my fixation on systems, my discomfort with ambiguity, my inability to disengage. It never mentioned cheating. It never mentioned Callum. It never mentioned the laugh. Instead, It painted me as a man unraveling quietly while she stood bravely nearby, worried but compassionate. She hadn't sent it yet. She was waiting for the right moment, the moment when enough doubt had accumulated to make it believable. I didn't delete it. I didn't edit it. I downloaded it. Then I closed the laptop and went to bed. The next morning, I forwarded 3 things to Mara: the draft letter, the original audio clip, the laugh, and a time-stamped log of Maris's attempts to contact me after formal no contact had been established. Her response came fast. She just handed you the knife. At noon, Maris finally sent the letter. She didn't copy me. She didn't have to. By 4 p.m., the board called an emergency session. By 6, Mara was with me in a quiet conference room with glass walls and bad coffee. We didn't speak while they read. The board chair looked tired when he finished. Ms. Vale has submitted serious concerns, he said carefully. Mara slid the audio file across the table without a word. The chair hesitated, then pressed play. Maris's voice filled the room, laughing, confident, unfiltered. Honestly, I control him with just one simple thing. Silence followed. Not the awkward kind, the permanent kind. The chair stopped the recording, then Mara placed the draft letter beside it. Same author, she said calmly. 2 narratives, 1 truth. No one spoke for a long moment. Finally, someone asked, "Why would she write this?" I answered before Mara could. "Because control doesn't survive exposure," I said. "So it has to replace reality instead." The meeting ended quietly. No shouting, no accusations, just decisions being made. When I left the building, Maris was waiting outside. She looked composed, too composed. "You think you're clever," she said. I didn't stop walking. "You think you trapped me," she continued, keeping pace. "But you don't understand how this works." I finally looked at her. "You wrote the letter," I said. Her smile tightened. I protected myself. "You exposed yourself," I replied. She laughed softly. "They'll forget. They always do." I leaned closer, not angry, not threatening. "They won't forget the laugh," I said, "because it wasn't about me." Her eyes flickered. "It was about who you are when you think no one's listening." That was the moment her certainty cracked. Not shattered, cracked. And through it, something ugly showed. "You were supposed to stay small," she hissed. I nodded. That was the plan. Then I walked away. Behind me, she stood alone on the sidewalk, her story collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions. I didn't feel victorious. I felt done. Because revenge isn't loud when it's real. It's procedural. It's patient. And it ends the moment the other person realizes they can no longer rewrite you. And that realization was finally settling in, whether she liked it or not. The first thing Maris did when she realized the board was done listening wasn't to apologize. It was to disappear. That should have worried me more than it did. People like her don't vanish because they're ashamed. They vanish because they're rearranging their pieces where you can't see them. Silence, in her hands, wasn't surrender. It was cover. 3 days went by without a single attempt to reach me. No calls, no texts. No mutual friends suddenly checking in. The air felt too clean. On the 4th night, I came back to the house for the first time since I'd stopped sleeping there. Not because I missed it, because I needed documents. Originals, deeds, insurance paperwork, maintenance certifications I'd foolishly kept in the home office instead of my truck. The house smelled wrong. Not stale, not abandoned, recently occupied. I stood in the entryway for a long moment, keys still in my hand, listening. Nothing. I stepped inside and locked the door behind me. The living room was untouched. Couch cushions aligned, no throw pillows disturbed. The kitchen counters wiped down with the kind of precision Maris only used when she was trying to prove something to herself. Control through cleanliness. I moved slowly, deliberately, checking corners the way I'd learned to do after storms, looking for damage that didn't announce itself. Then I saw it. The spare room door was open. My room, the bed was stripped, sheets gone, pillow missing, not stolen, removed. On the nightstand sat my phone charger, neatly coiled, my old watch, a framed photo I'd packed away months ago, arranged, like an altar to a version of me she wanted resurrected. That was when I heard her voice, not behind me, from the kitchen. "I knew you'd come back," she said. I didn't turn. "I told myself I wouldn't be here," she continued calmly, "but I wanted to see if I was right." I walked into the kitchen. Maris stood by the counter, barefoot, wearing one of my old shirts, the one she used to steal when she wanted me softened, the sleeves rolled up, hair loose, no makeup, a performance stripped down to its essentials. She smiled when she saw my face, not warm, satisfied. "You always come back for unfinished business," she said. I set my folder on the table. "This isn't a conversation," I replied. She tilted her head. "Everything is a conversation if you listen. I'm not here for you." "I know," she said. "You're here because you think you're done." I didn't answer. She stepped closer, not touching, not invading, just close enough to shift the space. "They dropped me," she said quietly. "The board, the pier, everyone." I nodded once. "That tends to happen." Her eyes flickered. "You don't feel anything?" "I feel accurate." She laughed softly. "You always did." For a moment, she just studied me. "You think you exposed me," she said, "but you don't understand what you actually did." I met her gaze. "Enlighten me." "You took away my audience," she said. "That hurts. I won't pretend it doesn't." She stepped closer again. "But you also took away your shield." I didn't move. "You were protected by being boring," she continued, "by being overlooked, by being the good, quiet man no one wanted to believe could turn." Her smile sharpened. "Now they're watching you." That one landed, not because it scared me, because it was true. "I'm fine with being watched," I said. "Are you?" she asked. "Because attention cuts both ways." She reached into her pocket and placed her phone on the counter, face down. "Do you know how many people I've talked to in the last week?" she asked. "I don't care." "You should," she replied, "because stories spread faster than evidence." I leaned forward, palms on the counter, lowering my voice. "You tried that already," I said. "You lost," she smiled. "Not this version." I straightened. "This ends now," I said. "You don't contact me. You don't come near my work. You don't use my name." Her eyes darkened. "Or what?" I considered the question. "Or you keep finding out how little control you have," I said. Silence stretched between us. Then she did something unexpected. She reached out and turned the phone face up. The screen lit. A draft message. Not to me. To the city. To a reporter. To a domestic advocacy group. The subject line read, "When control turns invisible." "You see," she said softly, "I don't need to convince them you're dangerous." She looked up at me. "I just need them to wonder." That was the moment I crossed the line she never thought I would. I smiled, not politely, not kindly. I reached into my jacket and placed my own phone beside hers. Unlocked, screen already recording. Her smile froze. "You really don't learn," I said calmly. "You talk when you think you're winning." She stared at the phone, then back at me. "How long?" she asked. "Since you said you knew I'd come back." Her breath hitched. "And," I added, "since you admitted you were planning another narrative." She backed up a step. "You wouldn't use that," she said. "You're not that person." I stepped closer now. Not threatening. Final. "I already am," I said. "You made me." Her mask cracked. Not into tears, into rage. "You think this scares me," she snapped. "I'll burn you with it." "You can try," I said, "but you won't get near me again." I picked up the folder. "Get out of my house," I said. She stared at me like she was memorizing my face for a crime report. Then she laughed. Short, ugly, sharp. "This isn't over," she said. I opened the door. "It is," I replied. "You just don't know how to stop." She walked past me without another word, shoulder brushing mine deliberately. I didn't flinch. I locked the door behind her and stood there for a long time, listening to her car drive away. Not chasing, not looking back. Because the fear she'd tried to plant had missed its target. She didn't understand the final shift. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was containing. And once someone like her realizes she can't reach you, can't provoke you, can't narrate you, she does the only thing she has left. She panics, which meant the end was finally close. She panicked exactly the way I knew she would. Not loud, not fast, strategic panic. The kind that dresses itself up as concern and spreads sideways instead of forward. The next morning, my phone didn't ring. Instead, my email filled up. 3 messages, all within 20 minutes. All from different addresses, all using the same careful language. Just checking in, heard some worrying things, hope you're taking care of yourself. Maris had activated the Whisper Network. Not accusations, not claims, questions. Questions are safer. Questions don't have to be proven. Questions turn into assumptions if you let them sit long enough. I didn't answer a single one. I went to work. That was always the mistake people like her made. They assumed that when pressure appeared, I'd freeze, that I'd retreat, that I'd get smaller. Instead, I got precise. By noon, Mara had already seen it. "She's testing the perimeter," she said over the phone. "Soft contact, social pressure. She's trying to make you feel observed." "I am observed," I replied. "That's fine." There was a pause. "You're not afraid," she said. "No." "That's new. It's permanent." The real move came that evening. Not a message, not a call, a car. I saw it when I pulled into the pier parking lot just before dusk, parked across the street, engine off, lights dark. Wrong angle, wrong placement. I didn't slow. I parked, locked my truck, and walked toward the boardwalk like nothing existed outside my immediate path. Footsteps followed, measured, confident, close enough to be intentional. "You should have stayed gone," Maris said behind me. I stopped, didn't turn. "This is a bad idea," I said calmly. "You don't get to decide that anymore," she replied. I turned then. She stood under a flickering streetlight, coat buttoned, hair pulled back tight. No softness left, no performance. Just intent. "You recorded me," she said. "Yes." "You think that protects you?" "It documents you," I corrected. Her lips pressed together. "I could say you lured me there. I could say I felt unsafe." I nodded. "You could. And people would listen." "Some might," I agreed. She stepped closer. "I know where you sleep now." That was the moment, not because it scared me, because it confirmed the final step. "You don't," I said. Her brow furrowed. I took my phone out and held it up. Not threatening, not dramatic. "Your last 3 attempts to contact me were logged," I said. "Your appearance at the house was recorded. Your presence here is on public cameras, and this conversation is being captured from 2 angles." Her breath changed. Shorter now. "You're bluffing." I smiled. "No," I said. "I'm finished." She looked past me then. Toward the pier, toward the lights, toward the cameras she'd always assumed were tools instead of witnesses. "This isn't how it ends," she said. "It is," I replied, "because you don't get a scene." Her jaw tightened. "You think you won by being quiet." "No," I said. "I won by removing myself from your reach." She took another step forward. I didn't move. "You don't scare me," she said. "I know," I replied. "You scare yourself." That did it. Her control snapped, not outward, but inward. The composure collapsed under its own weight. "You were nothing without me," she hissed. "You hear me? Nothing." I leaned in just enough for my voice to stay private. "And you were everything because I stayed," I said. "Now look at you." She froze. Not because of the words, because of the silence after them. People were watching now. Not obviously, not openly, but watching. A security guard at the far end of the pier had slowed his walk. A couple near the arcade had stopped pretending not to notice. Witnesses. Maris felt it. She stepped back. This was the part she never practiced. Exit without applause. "You think this ends me?" she said weakly. "No," I replied. "It ends us." She searched my face one last time. For anger, for longing, for regret. There was nothing. She laughed then. Once, hollow. "You're not the man I married," she said. I nodded. "You trained that man out of existence." She turned and walked away fast, heels striking too hard against the boards. I didn't follow. I didn't watch. I stood there until her car started and disappeared into traffic. Then I did the last thing I'd planned. I sent the file. Not publicly, not dramatically, quietly, to the one place it would never disappear, a formal complaint, with attachments, with timestamps, with recordings, with patterns. No commentary, no emotion, just facts. I put my phone away and walked onto the pier. The wind was strong now, pulling at my jacket, rattling the lights overhead. The ocean roared beneath the boards, constant and indifferent. I walked to the far end where the noise drowned everything else out, and I stopped. Because that was the end. Not with her screaming, not with her begging, not with forgiveness, but with distance, with silence, with a man standing where he could no longer be reached. And that was the most devastating thing I could have done to her. So I turned my back on the lights and walked away while she was still trying to be heard. I didn't expect relief. People always talk about relief like it's a reward. Like once you outlast the worst of someone, your chest loosens and the air tastes different. That's not what happened. What came instead was vigilance. Because the most dangerous moment isn't when someone is loud, it's when they go quiet after failing publicly. Maris didn't contact me again. No calls, no emails, no indirect concern through friends. She vanished so completely that even the whisper network dried up. No new questions, no cautious glances, no just checking in messages. That silence wasn't peace. It was preparation. I felt it in my body before I saw it anywhere else. The way you feel a storm hours before the sky changes color. Pressure without wind. Stillness that doesn't belong. I changed routines, not dramatically. Nothing that would look like fear. Just small, rational adjustments. Different parking spot. Different exit times. I stopped walking the pier alone after dark unless there were cameras and guards within line of sight. Not because I thought she'd hurt me, because people like her don't hurt you directly. They engineer situations where harm looks accidental. A week later, it finally surfaced. Not through her, through paperwork. A certified letter arrived at my temporary address, forwarded from the old house. The return address was a legal firm I recognized immediately. Not a powerhouse. Not a threat by volume operation. Something precise. Inside was a formal notice. She was seeking a protective order, not alleging physical violence, not alleging threats, claiming emotional intimidation, psychological pressure, coercive presence. I read it twice, then a third time. She'd learned. She'd stopped swinging wildly and switched to legal geometry, angles, implications, carefully framed language designed to trigger institutional reflexes. I didn't feel panic. I felt something colder, respect, not for her, for the fact that this was the final move she had left. I called Mara. She finally did it, I said. I know, she replied. I was notified an hour ago. She thinks this puts me on defense. It would, Mara said, if you hadn't documented everything for months. I closed my eyes. What happens now? I asked. Now, she said. You don't respond emotionally. You respond surgically. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. No press, no spectacle, just a judge, a clerk, 2 attorneys, and 2 people whose private collapse had turned procedural. Maris arrived early. Of course she did. She sat straight-backed, composed, eyes downcast in a way that looked rehearsed but effective. She wore neutral colors, no jewelry, hair pulled back tight. She looked exactly like someone who wanted to appear credible without appearing aggressive. She didn't look at me, I didn't look at her. When the judge asked her to speak, her voice trembled in all the right places. She talked about a shift, about a sudden withdrawal, about being watched. She never raised her voice. She never accused, she implied. And implication in a courtroom is a blade. Then it was my turn. Mara stood. She didn't start with rebuttal. She started with a timeline, dates, locations, patterns. She introduced logs, messages, recordings, not emotionally framed, not narrativized, just stacked. The judge listened. Maris's composure cracked for the first time when the audio played. Not the laugh, not yet. The earlier recordings, the ones where she outlined plans, where she discussed narrative control, where she spoke calmly about turning concern into leverage. Her attorney objected. The judge overruled. Then came the laugh, clear, unfiltered. Honestly, I control him with just one simple thing. The room went very still. Maris looked up then. Not at the judge, at me, for the first time in weeks. And in her eyes I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not contempt, fear, not fear of punishment, fear of irrelevance. The judge didn't say much after that. He didn't need to. The request was denied, firmly. When we stood to leave, Maris finally spoke to me, not loudly, not dramatically. You didn't have to do this, she said. I looked at her for a long moment. I didn't, I replied. You did. She stared at me like she wanted to say something else, something final. Then she turned and walked out of the courtroom alone. I thought that would be the end. I was wrong. The last attempt didn't come through law or reputation or narrative. It came through space. 2 nights later, I found her in my truck. Not inside, leaning against it, waiting. The pier parking lot was nearly empty. Wind off the water, lights humming. She didn't look composed this time. She looked stripped. You can't erase me, she said as I approached. I didn't, I replied. You erased yourself. She laughed bitterly. You think you won. I unlocked the truck but didn't get in. I think you're out of moves, I said. She stepped closer. Too close. You still feel it, she said. The pull. I shook my head. That was dependence, not connection. Her eyes flashed. I made you. I leaned in, close enough that she couldn't pretend this was performance anymore. No, I said quietly. You revealed me. That broke something, not into tears, into fury. You think you're free? She hissed. You'll always carry this. I met her gaze. Yes, I said, but you'll carry me. She froze. You'll replay every moment you underestimated me, I continued. Every laugh, every plan that didn't land. I stepped past her and opened the truck door. This is the last time we speak, I said. If you come near me again, it won't be private, it won't be negotiable, and it won't end the way you want. She didn't answer. She just stood there, shaking slightly, as I got in and started the engine. The headlights washed over her face for a moment. Then I drove. I didn't check the mirror, because I didn't need to see her shrinking to know it was happening. The pier lights faded behind me, the road opened ahead, and somewhere in the dark, a woman who had built her power on control finally understood what it meant to lose access forever. The story didn't continue, because I didn't. The story still didn't feel finished to me. Not because she was still a threat, but because control like hers doesn't end loudly. It withers. It claws. It looks for a last place to hide. That kind of ending needs time to suffocate. A week passed, then another. No sightings, no messages, no legal noise, nothing from friends, from the pier, from the city. The world resumed its rhythm, and that alone felt surreal. People laughed where tension had lived. Meetings went back to being boring. The pier creaked the way it always had, indifferent to the collapse of a marriage it never asked for. I started sleeping normally again, not deeply, not peacefully, but without waiting for footsteps. Then, one evening, as I was locking up the maintenance office, I noticed something wrong. Not dramatic, not obvious, just off. The bulletin board inside the office, where safety notices and emergency contacts were pinned, had been rearranged. Nothing removed, nothing added, just reordered. At first glance, it meant nothing, but Maris had always rearranged things when she was anxious. Straightened objects that didn't need straightening, aligned papers that were already aligned, control through order. My pulse didn't spike. It slowed. I checked the logbook. No forced entry. No alarms triggered, which meant she'd been let in. I didn't rush. I didn't call anyone. I walked the pier instead, slow, methodical. Every light, every shadow, every reflection in glass. Halfway down the boardwalk, near the shuttered arcade, I saw her, sitting on a bench. Waiting, not hiding, not dramatic, just present. I stopped a few meters away. You shouldn't be here, I said calmly. She didn't look up. Neither should you. I work here. She smiled faintly. You used to live with me. That was the last thread she had. Memory. I came to say goodbye, she said. I almost laughed. People don't ambush goodbye, I replied. She finally looked at me then. Her face wasn't angry. It was empty. They don't let me forget, she said. Everywhere I go, someone knows. I said nothing. I can't fix it, she continued. I can't outtalk it. I can't reframe it. Her fingers curled into her coat sleeve. You broke something permanent. I stepped closer, but stayed out of reach. No, I said. You revealed it. She shook her head. You don't understand what you took from me. I met her eyes. You don't understand what you taught me. Silence stretched. The ocean roared beneath the pier, swallowing smaller sounds. You were supposed to stay, she said quietly. You were supposed to be manageable. That word again? Manageable. I stayed until staying meant disappearing, I replied. She laughed then. Not sharp, not bitter, tired. I don't know who I am without control, she admitted. For the first time, the words sounded real, and for the first time, they didn't matter. That's not my problem, I said. She flinched, not because of cruelty, but because of finality. What happens now? She asked. I considered that. Now, I said, you leave. And you? She pressed. I continue, I replied. She stood slowly, like the movement itself required effort. For a moment, I thought she might say something meaningful. Instead, she straightened her coat and said, You think this makes you better than me? I shook my head. No, I said. It makes me unreachable. That was the last thing she hadn't prepared for. She turned and walked away along the pier, her footsteps echoing hollowly against the boards. I watched until she disappeared into the darkness between lights. Then I stayed where I was, not chasing, not watching, just standing in the space where control had finally failed. The wind cut colder that night. The pier lights hummed overhead. And for the first time since the laugh, since the leash, since the realization, I felt nothing pulling at me from behind. So I turned toward the open end of the pier, where the ocean stretched black and endless, and walked forward without looking back. because the story didn't need another confrontation, it needed distance, and I finally had enough.